Vince McMahon once screamed the words, "I hated him," about a wrestler who dared to challenge his power. For decades, Vince ran WWE like a king. He built an empire. But behind the scenes, his grudges were legendary. Some wrestlers made one mistake and paid for it their entire careers. Others crossed lines Vince would never forgive. Tonight, we reveal the 10 wrestlers who felt the full force of Vince's rage. These weren't just business decisions. They were personal wars. These were feuds that lasted decades. Some ended in reconciliation. Others ended in permanent exile. A few ended only when Vince himself lost power. Vince McMahon was more than just a wrestling promoter. He was a force of nature. He transformed wrestling from regional territories into a global entertainment empire. He created WrestleMania. He made wrestling mainstream. He turned performers into household names. But with that power came a dark side. Vince's temper was legendary. His grudges were deeper than any storyline. His memory for slights was perfect. And his capacity for revenge seemed endless. Why did Vince explode on some wrestlers, but forgive others who hurt his business even more? The answer reveals everything about how Vince really operated. Some betrayals he could forgive if the money was right. Other offenses crossed lines he would never forget. The difference between forgiveness and exile often came down to ego, to personal pride, to family honor. Understanding these 10 feuds means understanding the man who controlled wrestling for 40 years. Let's start with the moment that changed wrestling forever. November 9th, 1997, Montreal, Canada, Survivor Series. This was the night Vince McMahon proved he would do anything to protect his power. Bret Hart was the WWF champion. He was one of the biggest stars in the company. He had been with WWE for years. He was loyal. He was trusted. He was beloved by fans around the world. But business was changing. WWE was struggling financially. WCW was winning the ratings war. Stars were jumping ship for bigger contracts. Bret Hart was one of them. Bret had signed a lucrative contract with rival company WCW. It was a 20-year deal, guaranteed money. It was an offer Vince couldn't match. Vince actually encouraged Bret to take it. WWE was in financial trouble. They couldn't afford Bret's contract anymore, so Bret agreed to leave. But there was a problem. Bret was still the WWF champion. He needed to drop the title before moving to WCW. Bret was willing to do this. He was a professional. He understood the business. He agreed to drop the title before his departure, but Bret had conditions. He refused to lose to Shawn Michaels in Canada. This was his home country. Bret and Shawn had real-life heat. They genuinely disliked each other. Shawn had made disrespectful comments about Bret's family. Shawn had caused problems backstage. Bret felt that losing to Michaels in Canada would be disrespectful to his fans, to his legacy, to his integrity as a performer. Bret had creative control in his contract. This meant he could veto finishes. He could decide how he lost the title, and he exercised that right. He said no to losing in Montreal. Vince had a problem, a big problem. He feared Bret would appear on WCW television with the WWF Championship belt. This had happened before in wrestling history. When a champion showed up on another show with your title, it destroyed credibility. It made your championship look meaningless. It made your company look weak. Vince couldn't risk that. He couldn't trust that Bret would return the belt before appearing on WCW television. So Vince made a choice that would define his character for the rest of his career. Vince decided to screw Bret Hart. He ordered referee Earl Hebner to end the match early. The plan was secret. Only a handful of people knew. Shawn Michaels put Bret in a submission hold, the sharpshooter, Bret's own finishing move. Then referee Earl Hebner called for the bell. He signaled that Bret had submitted, but Bret never tapped out. He never gave up. He wasn't supposed to lose yet. The bell rang anyway. Shawn Michaels was declared the new WWF champion. Bret was shocked, confused, then furious. He had been betrayed on live television, in his home country, in front of his fans, by a man he trusted. This became known as the Montreal Screwjob. It is arguably the most talked about event in wrestling history. Wrestling fans still debate it today. Some say Vince had no choice. Some say it was the ultimate betrayal. Some think Bret was in on it the whole time. But most evidence suggests Bret was legitimately screwed. He didn't know what was happening until the bell rang. Backstage, chaos erupted. Bret was furious. He destroyed equipment in the locker room. He smashed monitors. He flipped tables. He was a man betrayed. Then he went looking for Vince. He had trusted Vince. They had worked together for over a decade. Bret had given WWE his prime years, his health, his loyalty, and Vince had repaid him with public humiliation. Bret found Vince in the locker room. They talked briefly. Then Bret punched Vince in the face. It was a real punch, not a wrestling work. This was legitimate anger. This was betrayal meeting rage. The punch landed hard. Vince went down. The entire wrestling world heard about it. Some people who who were there said Vince deserved it. Others said Bret crossed a line, but everyone understood why it happened. Vince had violated trust to maintain control. He chose his company over his word. He prioritized the championship belt over a decade-long relationship. This moment defined who Vince really was. A man who would do anything to protect his empire. A man who valued power over loyalty. This moment was so profound it changed wrestling forever. It created the Mr. McMahon character on television. Before this, Vince was just an announcer to most fans. They didn't know he owned the company. After Montreal, Vince became a character, the evil boss, the corporate tyrant. He turned real-life conflict into storyline gold. He became the villain everyone loved to hate. The Mr. McMahon character fueled the Attitude Era. It created the Stone Cold Steve Austin storyline. It made Vince a television star in his own right. In a twisted way, screwing Bret Hart made Vince richer than ever. The feud with Bret lasted years. They didn't speak for almost a decade. Bret went to WCW feeling bitter, betrayed. He never forgot what Vince did, but eventually, as always with Vince, business won. In 2006, Bret returned to WWE. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame. It was an emotional moment. Later, Bret even wrestled Vince at WrestleMania. They made money together again. The grudge ended because there was profit in reconciliation. Money healed this wound. Vince forgave Bret because Bret could still draw crowds, because Bret's name still meant something, because nostalgia sells. The lesson was clear. If you made Vince money, he would forgive almost anything, but not everything. Some wrestlers crossed lines Vince would never forget. Now let's count down the 10 wrestlers who felt Vince's hatred most deeply. These are the names that made Vince lose sleep, the performers he blacklisted, mocked, or destroyed. Each story reveals something dark about how Vince ran his empire. These aren't ranked by talent. They're ranked by the depth of Vince's animosity, by how personal the grudge became, by how long the hatred lasted. Some of these wrestlers made business mistakes. Others made personal enemies. A few simply didn't fit Vince's narrow vision of what a star should look like, but all of them paid a price. All of them learned that crossing Vince McMahon had consequences that lasted years or even decades. Before WWE existed, wrestling was organized into territories. Different promoters controlled different regions. They worked together loosely, they respected boundaries, but Vince McMahon wanted to change that. He wanted national domination. He wanted to destroy the territory system and replace it with one company. His company. He succeeded, but that success required ruthlessness. It required a willingness to crush anyone who stood in his way. That same ruthlessness applied to his own roster. If you helped him, he might reward you. If you crossed him, he would destroy you. The 10 wrestlers on this countdown learned this lesson the hard way. Number 10, Rusev. Rusev was talented. Everyone could see it. Fans loved him. He had charisma. He could wrestle. He had a great look. He was intimidating but also entertaining. He came to WWE with his manager Lana. They worked as a heel team. Rusev played an anti-American foreign villain. It was an old wrestling trope, but Rusev made it work. He won matches. He built momentum. He became United States champion. Everything was going according to plan. WWE was building a new star, but then something happened that Vince couldn't control. Something organic. Something real. In 2017, Rusev Day became incredibly popular. It started as a joke. Rusev declared every day Rusev Day. He would celebrate himself. It was comedic, but also charming. Fans started bringing Rusev Day signs to shows. They chanted Rusev Day at live events. They bought Rusev Day merchandise. The reaction was organic, genuine, loud. Rusev wasn't supposed to be a fan favorite. He was supposed to be a villain, but the audience decided they loved him anyway. They chose him, not because WWE told them to, but because Rusev connected with them naturally. This created a problem for Vince. He hated when wrestlers became popular without his approval. He had a specific vision for who should be a star. He handpicked his main eventers. He decided who got pushed. When someone became popular organically, it challenged his authority. It suggested the audience knew better than he did. Vince couldn't tolerate that. His ego wouldn't allow it. So despite all the evidence that Rusev was connecting, Vince cooled him off. He stopped pushing him. He gave him bad storylines. He made sure Rusev never reached the top. The creative direction for Rusev became insulting. They put him in a love triangle storyline. They had him lose matches he should have won. They took away his momentum piece by piece. Fans kept chanting for Rusev Day. They kept showing support, but it didn't matter. Vince had made his decision. Rusev would not be a main event star. Not because he lacked talent. Not because fans didn't care, but because Vince didn't pick him. Because his popularity wasn't manufactured. Because he succeeded without permission. This was pure pettiness. Vince had a star ready to make him money. Rusev was over with the crowd. His merchandise was selling, he was drawing reactions. Every metric suggested he deserved a push, but Vince's ego got in the way. He couldn't stand that Rusev became popular on his own terms, so he sabotaged the momentum. He made sure Rusev stayed in the mid-card. He wasted years of potential. Eventually, Rusev left WWE. He went to AEW, where he became Miro. There he was given creative freedom. He became TNT champion. He showed what he could have been all along. The Rusev story reveals Vince's insecurity. He needed absolute control over every aspect of his show. When something happened naturally, when the audience made their own choice, it threatened his authority. He would rather kill organic popularity than admit he didn't have total control. This wasn't about business. Rusev was making money. This was about ego, about power, about a man who built an empire but couldn't handle when his subjects chose their own heroes. Number 9. Gail Kim. Gail Kim was a talented female wrestler. She could work. She understood psychology. She had athleticism that stood out. But WWE didn't treat women's wrestling seriously during her time there. This was before the women's revolution, before WWE started calling female wrestlers women instead of divas. In Gail's era, women's matches were short. They were treated as bathroom breaks. They rarely got meaningful storylines. The focus was on looks over ability, on drama over wrestling. This frustrated many talented female performers. Gail Kim was one of them. Gail felt disrespected. She felt the company ignored female talent. She watched as women who could really wrestle were given 3-minute matches. She saw talented performers reduced to eye candy. She experienced the creative disregard firsthand. The storylines were bad. The matches were rushed. The women's division was an afterthought. Gail tried to push through it. She tried to make the best of bad situations, but the frustration built over time. Eventually, it reached a breaking point. One night during a live match, Gail did something shocking. She was in a battle royal. Multiple women in the ring. The goal was to throw opponents over the top rope. The last woman standing wins, but Gail didn't want to wait. She didn't want to play along anymore, so she eliminated herself. She climbed over the rope and walked away, just left, during a live match, on television, in front of millions of viewers. It was her way of protesting, her way of saying this is pointless, her way of showing her frustration with how women were treated. The wrestling world noticed. Fans talked about it. Other wrestlers talked about it. And Vince definitely noticed. He hated public defiance. He hated anyone who made the company look bad on television. Wrestling is built on illusion, on maintaining the facade. When someone breaks that illusion intentionally, it damages the product. It makes everything look fake. It reminds fans that none of it matters. Vince couldn't tolerate that. It was disrespect. It was rebellion. It was making him look bad in front of his audience. Gail's frustration was understandable. Women's wrestling in WWE at that time was poorly handled. Many talented performers were wasted. The division needed better booking, better stories, better respect. Gail wasn't wrong to be frustrated, but her method guaranteed she would never return while Vince was in power. She embarrassed his company in front of millions. That was unforgivable. It didn't matter that she had legitimate complaints. It didn't matter that the women's division was poorly booked. What mattered to Vince was that she made WWE look bad. She broke the illusion. She showed disrespect on live television. Gail went on to have a great career elsewhere. She went to TNA, which later became Impact Wrestling. There, she was treated seriously. She had great matches. She won championships. She became a centerpiece of their women's division. She showed what she could do when given real opportunities. But in Vince's world, she was dead to him. She had committed the cardinal sin, public embarrassment, and Vince never forgave that. Number 8, Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes was a legend before he ever worked for Vince. He was the American dream, a son of a plumber who became a wrestling superstar. Dusty was huge in the territorial wrestling days. He was a star in Florida, in Georgia, in the Carolinas. He was beloved by fans. He represented the common man, the working class hero. His promos were legendary. His charisma was undeniable. He was everything a wrestling star should be. But Dusty represented something Vince wanted to destroy: the old wrestling system, the territorial era, the traditional way of doing business. Before Vince expanded nationally, wrestling worked differently. Different promoters controlled different territories. They had agreements. They respected boundaries. A wrestler might work in multiple territories throughout their career. They would move from region to region, building different characters, working with different opponents. It was a system that had existed for decades. It worked. It made money, but it was decentralized. No one person controlled everything. That system frustrated Vince. He wanted national domination. He wanted one company to rule control all of wrestling. When Vince expanded in the 1980s, he crushed those territories. He raided their talent. He ran shows in their cities. He drove many promoters out of business. The territorial system collapsed. Dusty Rhodes fought back. He was running one of those territories. He believed in the old way. He valued the relationships between promoters. He thought Vince's expansion would kill the wrestling business. In many ways, he was right. The territories died. Local wrestling cultures disappeared. But Vince won. His WWE became the dominant force, the only major game in town. Years later, Dusty worked for WWE in creative and developmental roles. He helped train young wrestlers. He contributed to storylines, but the tension never fully disappeared. Dusty believed in character-driven stories. He valued emotion and connection. He thought wrestling should be about people connecting with characters, about fans caring what happens. His creative philosophy came from the territory days, from a time when wrestlers built characters over months and years in front of the same fans every week. Vince wanted something different. He wanted corporate control. He wanted spectacle over substance. He wanted big moments and shocking twists. He wanted to manufacture stars rather than letting them develop naturally. Their philosophies clashed constantly. When Dusty suggested old-school booking, Vince often rejected it. When Dusty talked about emotional storytelling, Vince wanted more flash, more entertainment, more sports entertainment, as he called it. The old rivalry lingered in every meeting, in every creative session. Even when they worked together, Vince could never fully trust Dusty. Dusty represented a world Vince had conquered but never truly understood. Vince won the war for wrestling's future, but Dusty was a reminder that something was lost in that victory. The personal connections, the regional loyalty, the slow build, storytelling. Vince's WWE was bigger and richer than the territories ever were, but it was also more corporate, more manufactured, more controlled. Dusty represented authenticity in a world Vince had made artificial. This wasn't hatred like with Nails or Savage. This was ideological conflict. This was two men who represented different eras of wrestling, different philosophies of the business. Vince respected Dusty. He employed him for years, but he could never fully embrace what Dusty represented: the past, the tradition, the way things used to be before Vince changed everything. Number 7, Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate Warrior and Vince had a relationship built on money fights. From the very beginning, it was transactional. Warrior was a massive star in the early 1990s. He had an incredible look, muscles upon muscles, face paint, tassels, high energy. He would sprint to the ring, shake the ropes violently. His entrance alone was memorable. When he wrestled, it was pure intensity, short matches, big power moves. The crowd loved it. He was different from everyone else, unique, marketable. Vince saw dollar signs. Warrior was pushed as the next Hulk Hogan. At WrestleMania 6 in 1990, Warrior defeated Hogan for the WWF Championship. It was supposed to be a passing of the torch, the old champion giving way to the new. Warrior was the future. He was supposed to carry the company for the next decade, but there was a problem. Warrior wanted to be paid like Hogan. He demanded equal money. He felt if he was the champion, if he was the top guy, he deserved top guy money. From his perspective, this made sense. He was doing the work, drawing the crowds, selling the tickets. Why should he make less than Hogan? Vince disagreed. He felt Warrior hadn't earned Hogan's pay yet. He felt Warrior needed to prove himself over years, not months. The negotiations were constant, and they were hostile. Warrior felt disrespected. Vince felt manipulated. When they couldn't agree, Warrior walked out, just left, stopped showing up to events. This happened multiple times throughout the early 90s. Warrior would walk out over money, Vince would suspend him or fire him. Then months later, they would negotiate his return. He would come back, work for a while. Then another money dispute would arise, and the cycle would repeat. The fights weren't just about money. They fought over merchandising royalties. Wrestling merchandise was huge business in the 90s. T-shirts, action figures, posters. Warrior felt he wasn't getting his fair share of merchandise sales. He claimed Vince was cheating him, keeping money that should have gone to the performer. Vince countered by publicly alleging that Warrior's absences were linked to steroid use. He suggested Warrior was unreliable, unprofessional, difficult to work with. He painted Warrior as the villain in their business relationship. Warrior refuted these claims. He said Vince was in breach of contract regarding merchandise. Payments. He claimed he had documentation proving he was owed money. The accusations flew back and forth for years. Neither man fully trusted the other. Every negotiation was a battle. Every contract was a temporary truce. For VKM, Warrior's demands represented an attack on the company's internal financial structure and employee hierarchy. He couldn't allow one wrestler to dictate terms. If Warrior got everything he demanded, others would demand the same. The power structure would collapse. Despite the years of acrimony, the conflict was ultimately transactional. It was about money, not personal hatred. This became clear when WWE produced the self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior documentary in 2005. It was brutal. It was a hit piece. Former wrestlers were interviewed saying negative things about Warrior. Stories were told that made him look bad, unprofessional, selfish, difficult. The message was clear. Warrior was the problem, not Vince, not WWE. This was Vince's revenge for years of contract disputes. A documentary designed to destroy Warrior's legacy. But time heals financial wounds, especially when money's involved. In 2014, WWE inducted Warrior into the Hall of Fame. He gave a speech. He made peace with the company, with Vince. Warrior appeared at WrestleMania that weekend. He was on Monday Night Raw the next night. It seemed like the grudge was over. Tragically, Warrior died days later from a heart attack. He was only 54 years old. His reconciliation with WWE happened just in time. The Warrior story demonstrates something important about Vince's grudges. When the fight was purely financial, forgiveness was possible. Warrior cost Vince millions with his walkouts. He caused booking headaches. He made threats and demands. But it was all about money, about contracts, about business terms. There was no personal betrayal, no family insult, no physical attack. So eventually, when both men were older, when enough time had passed, they could do business again. Warrior's cultural value returned. His name still meant something to fans. Nostalgia made him profitable again. So Vince forgave, because forgiveness could be monetized. Number 6, Scott Steiner. Scott Steiner was outspoken. He was aggressive. He was unpredictable. He didn't hide his feelings about anything. When Steiner had a problem with someone, everyone knew. He would say it to their face. He would say it in interviews. He would say it on social media. He had no filter, no corporate polish, no carefully managed public image. That personality made him exciting, dangerous, unpredictable, but it also made him difficult, especially for someone like Vince, who valued control above everything else. Scott Steiner came from a legendary wrestling family. He and his brother Rick were the Steiner brothers. They were one of the greatest tag teams in wrestling history. They worked in WCW, they worked in WWE, they worked in Japan. They had success everywhere. Scott was incredibly strong. He could throw wrestlers around like they weighed nothing. He had legitimate power, but as his career progressed, Scott became more volatile, more outspoken, more willing to burn bridges. Their relationship started fine. Vince liked the Steiner brothers. They were talented. They drew money. They had credibility. When they worked in WWE in the early 90s, things went relatively well. But as time went on, Scott's personality became an issue. He said things that made management uncomfortable. He refused to follow scripts exactly as written. He pushed back against creative decisions. In WWE's system, this was problematic. Vince demanded obedience. He wanted wrestlers who followed directions, who stayed in their lane. Scott Steiner wasn't that guy. The relationship soured into what was later described as the most hated relation. Scott became hostile toward Vince and his family. He made politically charged comments about them. He criticized the company publicly. But unlike some wrestlers who whisper complaints backstage, Scott said everything loud, on camera, in shoot interviews, on social media. He called out the McMahon family directly. He questioned their business practices, their ethics, their treatment of wrestlers. He held nothing back. Vince hated this. Scott was unscripted chaos. He said whatever he wanted. He couldn't be controlled, couldn't be managed, couldn't be predicted. For a man like Vince, who built his empire on controlling every word spoken on his television shows, Scott Steiner represented a nightmare, a loose cannon who might say anything at any time. So Scott became an outsider. He was blacklisted from WWE for years. He worked elsewhere. He had success in TNA, but WWE's doors were closed, not because of lack of talent, but because of personality conflict, because Scott refused to be controlled. But something interesting happened. After Vince stepped away from power, the Steiner brothers were inducted into the Hall of Fame. This happened in 2022. Vince had lost control of WWE by then. He was still involved, but no longer the sole decision maker. New management made different choices. They could look past personal grudges that Vince had held. They could do business with people Vince personally disliked. The Steiner induction proved something important. Many of these grudges were personal to Vince. They weren't company policy. They were ego battles between Vince and individual wrestlers. Once Vince lost absolute power, reconciliation became possible. The company could work with people Vince hated. They could recognize accomplishments Vince had ignored. This shows how much his personal feelings shaped WWE for decades. How many careers were limited not by talent or drawing power, but by whether they offended Vince personally. Scott Steiner was talented enough to be in the Hall of Fame for years, but it took Vince losing power for it to happen. That says everything about how Vince operated. Number 5, Cesaro. Cesaro was incredibly talented. His real name is Claudio Castagnoli. He came to WWE with an impressive resume. He had worked in Europe, he had worked in independent promotions across America, he had proven himself everywhere he went. When he arrived in WWE, fans and wrestlers immediately recognized his ability. Cesaro was strong, incredibly strong. He could lift and throw opponents who outweighed him by 50 pounds. He made difficult moves look effortless. His strength was legitimate, not just wrestling strong, actually strong, but Cesaro was more than just power. He was athletic. He could wrestle any style, technical wrestling, high-flying moves, power moves, brawling. He adapted to any opponent. He made everyone look good. Other wrestlers loved working with him because they knew the match would be great. Fans appreciated his skill. They recognized they were watching something special. Cesaro consistently had some of the best matches on every show he was on. By every measurable metric, he should have been a main event star. But Vince didn't see it. Vince didn't see a star when he looked at Cesaro. He saw a good worker, a solid hand, someone useful for the mid-card, but not a top guy, not a main eventer, not someone to build the company around. And in 2014, Vince made his feelings public. He appeared on the Stone Cold podcast with Steve Austin. It was a rare interview where Vince spoke candidly about WWE. Austin asked about Cesaro, about why he wasn't being pushed to the main event. Vince's answer was devastating. Vince said Cesaro was physically talented. He acknowledged the strength and the ability. Then he added a but. He said Cesaro lacked charisma. He said Cesaro didn't have the it factor necessary to connect with the audience. He used that phrase specifically, the it factor, that nebulous, undefined quality that Vince claimed some people had and others didn't. According to Vince, Cesaro didn't have it, and without it, he could never be a top star. This statement came directly from the CEO of the company on a podcast that thousands of people would hear. It was a career death sentence. That statement became Cesaro's career ceiling. No matter what he did after that, those words hung over him. When he had great matches, people remembered Vince said he lacked charisma. When crowds chanted for him, people wondered why Vince didn't see what everyone else saw. When other wrestlers praised him, it didn't matter. Vince had spoken. And in WWE, Vince's word was law. Once he decided you didn't have it, you were never getting to the top. The ceiling was set. The judgment was final. But this public critique served another purpose. It was a defense mechanism. Vince used this strategy often throughout his career. When a talented wrestler didn't reach the main event, Vince blamed the wrestler. He said they lacked charisma. He said they couldn't connect. He said they didn't have the it factor. This deflected criticism away from WWE's creative failures. It shifted. Blame from the company to the individual. The narrative became this: if a highly skilled athlete failed to reach the main event, it was the performer's personal shortcoming. Not the company's lack of creative direction, not the poor booking, not the failure to build stars. It was the wrestler's fault for not having that mysterious it factor. This was convenient for Vince. It meant he never had to take responsibility for wasted talent, for poor creative decisions, for failing to elevate performers the audience clearly liked. He could just say they don't have it and move on. But the truth was more complicated. The truth was simpler. Vince had a very specific vision of what a star looked like. Muscular in a specific way, tall, charismatic in a very particular style, usually someone who could cut promos like a comedian or an action movie star. If you didn't fit that exact mold, you were labeled deficient. Cesaro didn't fit Vince's mold. He was bald. He was European. His English was good but accented. He wasn't a natural promo guy in the way Vince valued. He was a wrestler first. And in Vince's WWE, being a great wrestler was never enough. You had to be an entertainer, a sports entertainer, as Vince called it. You had to talk. You had to have catchphrases. You had to fit the exact template Vince had in his mind. Cesaro didn't fit. So instead of adapting the system to utilize his talents, Vince dismissed him, labeled him without it, and kept him in the mid-card forever. Cesaro's career suffered not because he lacked talent. Everyone knew he was talented. It suffered because he didn't fit Vince's narrow definition of a superstar. And Vince would rather hold someone back than admit his vision was limited, than admit that maybe different types of performers could be stars, that maybe the audience might value something different than what Vince wanted them to value. Vince's ego couldn't allow that, so Cesaro remained stuck, a victim not of his own limitations, but of Vince's refusal to see past his own biases. Number 4, Christian. Christian was Edge's tag team partner. They were both talented. They both connected with audiences. But Edge became a world champion. Edge main evented WrestleMania. Christian never reached that level in WWE. Why? According to multiple sources, Vince didn't like Christian's face. He didn't like Christian's look. It was that simple, that shallow, that arbitrary. Vince told commentator Todd Grisham to undersell Christian's entrance. Grisham was instructed to say it's Christian with no excitement, no energy. Just acknowledge him and move on. This was active sabotage. entourage. Christian left WWE and went to TNA. There, he became a world champion. He main evented shows. He proved he could carry a company. But when he returned to WWE, the same ceiling remained. Vince's aesthetic prejudice hadn't changed. Christian's story reveals something disturbing about Vince's leadership. Talent didn't always matter. Performance didn't always matter. Sometimes your career was decided by whether Vince liked how you looked. This wasn't a meritocracy. It was a dictatorship of preference. And if Vince decided he didn't like your face, your potential was capped forever. Number 3, CM Punk. CM Punk was a rebel. He spoke his mind. He challenged the system. In 2011, he delivered the famous pipe bomb promo. He sat on a stage and told the truth. He criticized WWE. He criticized Vince. He talked about favoritism. He talked about part-timers like The Rock and Brock Lesnar taking spots from full-time wrestlers. It was raw. It was real. Fans loved it. But it was also a warning sign. Punk was frustrated. He was burning out. The company ignored his health problems. They ignored his complaints. By 2014, Punk couldn't take it anymore. After the Royal Rumble, he walked out. He went home. He was done. Vince's response was cold. Despite attempts to calm things down, WWE fired Punk on his wedding day. Let that sink in. They chose his wedding day to terminate him. That wasn't an accident. That was calculated cruelty. It was revenge. But the fight didn't end there. WWE's ringside doctor filed a defamation lawsuit against Punk. Reports suggested Vince may have supported this lawsuit. He used corporate resources to punish someone who left. Punk's crime wasn't just walking out. It was intellectual rebellion. He publicly exposed how the company operated. He challenged Vince's creative judgment. He made Vince look bad. For that, Vince demanded the severest punishment. The grudge lasted years. Only after Vince left WWE did Punk return. In 2024, CM Punk came back to wrestling, but not while Vince held power. This proves how personal the hatred was. Vince couldn't let go. He couldn't forgive someone who made him look foolish. Even when it cost the company money, even when fans wanted Punk back, Vince's ego mattered more than profit, at least in this case. Number 2, Nails. Nails had a short WWE career, but his exit was explosive. In 1992, after SummerSlam, Nails got into a pay dispute with Vince. He felt he was owed money, so he confronted Vince backstage. The confrontation turned violent. Nails grabbed Vince by the throat. He choked him. Other people had to pull Nails off. Then Nails broke free and choked Vince again. This was a physical assault on the company's CEO. Nails later said Vince had squashed many careers. He said Vince ran into the wrong guy, someone who wasn't afraid to fight back. But Nails didn't stop there. He called 911 from the venue. He filed legal charges. He made a bizarre allegation that Vince had molested him. This claim was never proven. It was widely dismissed, but it escalated the situation beyond repair. Nails was immediately and permanently blacklisted. He never worked in major wrestling again. This case drew a clear line. Vince would tolerate many things. He forgave wrestlers who cost him millions. He forgave people who jumped to rival companies. But if you physically attacked him, you were done. If you threatened his safety, there was no second chance. No reconciliation, no forgiveness, ever. Number 1, Randy Savage. This is the deepest grudge, the most personal, the most mysterious. Randy Savage left WWF for WCW in 1994. When he left, he took the Slim Jim sponsorship with him. That hurt WWE financially. But many wrestlers jumped to WCW. Hulk Hogan nearly destroyed WWF by going to WCW. Yet Vince eventually forgave Hogan. He brought him back multiple times. But Randy Savage was different. Vince never forgave Randy. Not while Randy was alive, not for 17 years. This wasn't about business. It was personal. Vince felt Savage betrayed him like a brother would. Savage had been a cornerstone of WWE. He was a main eventer. He was trusted. His departure felt like a knife in the back. But the grudge went deeper than that. For years, dark rumors circulated in the wrestling community. Rumors involving Savage and a young Stephanie McMahon. These rumors have never been verified. They are often dismissed as internet speculation. Most people doubt they are true, but the intensity of Vince's hatred gave those rumors life. Why else would Vince hold such an extreme grudge? Why would he refuse to reconcile with a deceased man? WWE aired segments mocking Savage. They created a character called Nacho Man to make fun of him. This was petty. This was vindictive. Vince used his television platform to insult someone who couldn't respond, someone who was no longer even in the business. This went beyond professional rivalry. Savage died in 2011. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015. 4 years after his death, Vince finally allowed it, but by then Savage couldn't enjoy it. He couldn't reconcile reconcile with his old friend. Whatever happened between them, Vince took that secret to his grave, or at least out of his company. The hatred was so strong that even death didn't soften it for years. Let's step back and look at the pattern. These 10 wrestlers reveal the truth about Vince McMahon's leadership. He operated on a forgiveness index. If you made him money, almost anything could be forgiven. Hulk Hogan nearly bankrupted WWE by jumping to WCW. Hogan came back. Brock Lesnar walked out multiple times. He came back. Bret Hart was involved in the biggest scandal in wrestling history. He came back. But if you crossed certain personal lines, money didn't matter. If you physically threatened Vince like Nails did, you were gone forever. If you allegedly crossed family lines like Savage supposedly did, you were erased. If you publicly humiliated him like Punk did, you stayed banned until Vince lost power. The wrestlers who suffered from aesthetic bias, like Christian and Cesaro, faced a different kind of hatred. It wasn't about revenge. It was about Vince's rigid vision of stardom. He believed in a specific look, a specific style. If you didn't fit that mold, you were labeled deficient. Your skills didn't matter. Your connection with fans didn't matter. Vince's personal preference became your career ceiling. This reveals how arbitrary his system was. Talent was subjective. Success depended on whether Vince liked you. The business grudges, like those with Ultimate Warrior and Dusty Rhodes, show Vince's territorial nature. He viewed business challenges as personal attacks. When Warrior demanded equal pay, Vince felt disrespected. When Dusty represented the old territorial system, Vince saw an enemy. These weren't just contract disputes. They were threats to Vince's authority, and Vince never forgot threats. Former WWE creative team members described the environment as one of the worst they had ever seen. The culture was toxic. Fear ruled the locker room. Vince encouraged ambition, but only on his terms. He told wrestlers to grab the brass ring, but when they tried, he often punished them. The rules were arbitrary. The expectations were impossible. Failure was blamed on the talent, never on creative. This created a workplace where resentment festered, where grudges became inevitable. Vince's management style was volatile. He mixed real-life tensions with television storylines. The Montreal Screwjob created the Mr. McMahon character. His real feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin became the foundation of the Attitude Era. Vince turned shoots into works. He weaponized genuine conflict for profit. This strategy made him very rich, but it also left a trail of damaged relationships, broken trust, permanent enemies. Many of these grudges lasted decades. The Ultimate Warrior feud spanned from the early 1990s to 2014. The Randy Savage grudge lasted from 1994 until 2015. The CM Punk situation lasted from 2014 to 2024. These weren't brief disagreements. They were sustained campaigns of animosity. Vince held grudges longer than some people stay married. His memory for perceived slights was extraordinary, and his capacity for revenge was bottomless. But Vince's power is gone now. He stepped away from WWE amid serious allegations of misconduct in recent years. The company is now run by TKO. The new management operates differently. They don't carry Vince's personal grudges. That's why CM Punk could return. That's why Scott Steiner got his Hall of Fame induction. The removal of Vince's personal influence allowed for reconciliation. This proves how much of WWE's culture was directly tied to one man's ego. His feelings shaped careers. His grudges determined futures. His preferences built some people up and tore others down. Looking at these 10 names, a question emerges. How many careers did Vince ruin with his pettiness? How many talented performers never reached their potential because they didn't fit his narrow vision? How many grudges were held for reasons that had nothing to do with business? Christian could have been a world champion. Cesaro could have main evented. Rusev could have been a top star. But Vince's ego got in the way. His need for control. His inability to let go of personal slights. The wrestling business has always been carnivalesque, larger than life, dramatic, but Vince took it further. He made backstage politics into blood sport. He turned personal relationships into weapons. He used his platform to settle scores. The 10 wrestlers on this list aren't just victims of bad booking. They're casualties of Vince's personality, his vindictiveness, his volatility, his need to dominate every aspect of his empire. Some of these stories have happy endings. Bret Hart reconciled and got his Hall of Fame moment. Ultimate Warrior made peace before he passed away. CM Punk returned to wrestling and found success again, but others never got closure. Randy Savage died before true reconciliation happened. Nails was erased from history. Christian never got the run he deserved. The damage was permanent. The opportunities were lost forever. Vince McMahon built the biggest wrestling company in the world. He created WrestleMania. He turned wrestling wrestling into mainstream entertainment. He made billions of dollars, but he did it at a cost. The cost was measured in broken relationships, in careers cut short, in talent wasted, in grudges held for decades. The 10 names on this list are proof. They show that Vince's empire was built on more than just business decisions. It was built on personal vendettas, on ego battles, on a management style that valued control over fairness. These grudges defined careers. They shaped the industry. They created stories that fans still talk about today. The Montreal Screwjob is legendary. The CM Punk walkout is infamous. The Randy Savage mystery is enduring. These moments happened because Vince made them personal. He couldn't separate business from emotion. He couldn't forgive slights. He couldn't let go. Now that Vince is gone from power, WWE is changing. The culture is shifting. Old grudges are being resolved. Blacklisted names are returning. The company is moving forward. But the legacy of Vince's grudges remains. These 10 wrestlers are part of wrestling history now. Their stories are cautionary tales. They show what happens when one man has too much power, when ego trumps talent, when personal hatred shapes professional decisions. The pattern is clear. Vince forgave those who made him money, Hogan, Lesnar, even Bret Hart eventually, but he never forgave those who threatened his ego, who challenged his authority, who crossed personal lines. Nails attacked him physically. Randy Savage allegedly crossed a family boundary. CM Punk exposed him intellectually. These were unforgivable sins in Vince's world. Money couldn't fix them. Time couldn't heal them. Only Vince's departure from power finally closed those chapters. For the aesthetic victims like Christian and Cesaro, there was no real crime, just bad luck. They didn't fit Vince's mental image of a star. They were collateral damage in a system that valued subjective preference over objective talent. Their punishment was wasted potential, careers spent below their ceiling, success denied not because they failed, but because Vince decided they weren't good enough before they even started. The business fighters like Ultimate Warrior and Dusty Rhodes represented challenges to Vince's authority. Warrior wanted equal pay. Dusty represented the old world Vince destroyed. These conflicts were about power, about who controlled the wrestling business. Vince couldn't tolerate challenges to his dominance. He had to win every battle, had to maintain absolute control. Grudges were the price of defiance. This list of 10 wrestlers tells the story of Vince McMahon's reign. Not the official story, not the sanitized version, but the real story, the one about grudges and egos, about power and control, about a man who built an empire but left behind a trail of enemies. These 10 names are monuments to that legacy. They're proof that Vince's hatred was as legendary as his success. The wrestling world has moved on. WWE continues without Vince. New stars are rising. Old grudges are being forgotten, but these 10 stories remain. They're part of wrestling lore now. They teach us that talent isn't always enough, that fairness doesn't always prevail, that sometimes the wrong person gets too much power. And when that happens, careers are destroyed. Potential is wasted. Grudges last forever. Vince McMahon named 10 wrestlers he hated. Some he hated for business reasons, some for personal reasons, some for reasons we'll never fully understand. But the hatred was real, the consequences were severe, and the legacy is permanent. These 10 wrestlers paid the price for crossing Vince McMahon. Their stories are the dark side of wrestling history, the side that reminds us that behind the entertainment, real people suffered real consequences. Not because of what happened in the ring, but because of what happened in Vince's mind. The era of Vince's grudges is over, but we'll never forget the casualties. The 10 wrestlers who learned the hard way that Vince McMahon's hatred was as powerful as his vision. They're part of wrestling history now, forever linked to the man who built an empire and crushed anyone who stood in his way. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Vince's most infamous grudges, hit that like button and drop a comment telling us which story shocked you most. We'll see you in the next one. Booker T is a legend, a two-time Hall of Famer, 35 championship reigns, one of the greatest to ever step in the ring. But if you listen closely to his podcast, you hear something else, a pattern, a list of names that keeps growing. Wrestlers he cannot stand, wrestlers he refuses to shake hands with, wrestlers he threatens with lawsuits. And just recently, one of wrestling's brightest young stars looked into a camera and said something that set Booker T off like never before. Swerve Strickland called him out, and Booker fired back hard. But Swerve is not the only one, not even close. So what makes a legend build so many enemies? Let's find out. Booker T has spent decades in wrestling. He survived prison, he survived the territories, he survived WCW's collapse. He built a Hall of Fame career on respect and hard work. But along the way, he also built walls, tall ones. And on the other side of those walls are 10 wrestlers who learned the hard way that crossing Booker T means war. Some of these feuds are old, some are brand new, some got resolved, others never will. This is the story of Booker T's hate list, and it starts right now. Number 10, Swerve Strickland. This one is fresh. This one is still burning. Swerve Strickland is the AEW World Champion, young, talented, rising fast. And in 2024, he said something about Booker T that you just don't say. Swerve brought up WrestleMania 21, a segment where Vince McMahon used the N-word in a skit with Booker T and John Cena. Swerve said that moment told you everything you need to know about Booker T. He implied Booker was willing to accept racially questionable creative. He suggested Booker was out of touch, maybe even a sellout. Booker T exploded. He said Swerve was out of pocket. He said Swerve does not understand the sacrifices required to stay on top in the early 2000s. He said Swerve benefits from doors that Booker helped open. And maybe Booker has a point, but the way he responded showed something else. Sensitivity, defensiveness, an inability to let younger wrestlers criticize him. Booker called Swerve's comments disrespectful. He dismissed them as ignorant. He painted himself as the pioneer who suffered so Swerve could thrive. But Swerve did not back down. He kept poking. He ended promos with lines targeting Booker. And Booker kept responding over and over on his podcasts, in interviews. It became clear that Booker T cannot handle being questioned by the new generation, especially when that questioning involves race and representation. This is not just a wrestling beef. This is generational trauma. An older black wrestler feeling attacked by a younger one. And instead of having a conversation, Booker built another wall. Number 9, Ahmed Johnson. If there is one name on this list that represents true hatred, it is Ahmed Johnson. Not philosophical disagreements, not professional disappointment, pure personal hate. Ahmed Johnson was a star in the WWF during the mid-90s. First black Intercontinental Champion. Big, intense, fast-tracked to the main event. At the same time, Booker T was grinding in WCW as a tag team wrestler with his brother Stevie Ray. Ahmed has said in interviews that Booker was jealous, that Booker was just a tag guy, while Ahmed was main eventing pay-per-views. That hurts Booker's pride. Booker values his slow-build career. He sees it as superior to Ahmed's rocket push. But Ahmed did not stop there. He went personal. He targeted Booker's prison past. Booker has been open about his robbery sentence. He calls it a turning point, a moment that forced him to change his life and get disciplined. Ahmed used that history as a weapon. He cast doubt on Booker's redemption story. He made it sound dirty, and Booker never forgave him. Years later, they ran into each other at an airport. This was likely in the early 2000s and 20s. Ahmed smiled. He tried to say hello, like the beef was just wrestling business. Like all the personal attacks were just show. Booker walked past him, did not say a word, did not even look at him. Booker later said on his podcast that Ahmed is a lying, notorious lying, low-down piece of, you know what? He said he did not even acknowledge him because of all the lies Ahmed told. He said if Ahmed tells another lie about him, he will sue. He will take him to court. He has receipts. He has facts. This is not a wrestling feud. This is real-life hatred, and Booker is proud of it. He refuses to acknowledge Ahmed exists. He refuses to be in the same room. Ahmed has responded by challenging Booker to a fight, by going on other podcasts like the Hannibal TV and talking trash. And Booker just threatens more lawsuits. It is petty, it is bitter, and it shows that Booker T holds grudges forever. Ahmed was unsafe in the ring. Ahmed injured people like Ron Simmons. Ahmed had a bad attitude. Ahmed's career fell apart because of injuries and his own mistakes. But Booker cannot let it go. He has to keep talking about it. He has to keep reminding everyone that he hates Ahmed. It is almost obsessive, and it makes you wonder if Booker spends too much time looking backward instead of forward. Number 8, Ryback. This is new school hatred, digital hatred, social media hatred. Ryback left WWE in 2016, and he has been angry ever since. He attacks Vince McMahon online. He attacks Triple H. He calls championship belts fake props. He says the titles mean nothing. He says he was held down. He complains constantly about his booking and his push. And Booker T cannot stand it. Booker views wrestling as something sacred, something that saved his life. He believes you should be grateful for the opportunity. He believes you take your bumps and say thank you. You do not air dirty laundry online. Ryback represents everything Booker hates about modern wrestlers. Entitlement, complaining, disrespect for the business, lack of accountability. Booker went on his podcast and destroyed Ryback. He said he has no respect for him. Zero. He said if he ever sees Ryback again, he will not shake his hand. In wrestling, refusing a handshake is a huge insult. It means you are not part of the fraternity. You are not one of the boys. Booker expelled Ryback from the Brotherhood, and he did it publicly. He called Ryback Ryback a whiner. He said Ryback lacks accountability for his own failures. He said Ryback's complaints about being held down are pathetic excuses. Ryback responded with personal insults on social media. He fired back at Booker, and Booker added him to the list. Permanently, the door is closed. Forever. But here is the thing. Booker's response was over the top. Ryback is bitter and angry, sure, but lots of wrestlers complain about their booking. Lots of wrestlers feel they were misused or underutilized. It happens all the time. Booker took it personally. He acted like Ryback was attacking him directly, like Ryback was insulting Booker's legacy. He made it about defending WWE's honor, about defending the business, about protecting the system, but really he was just defending his own worldview, his own philosophy. Booker cannot handle wrestlers who do not play by his rules, who do not show gratitude the way he thinks they should, who question the people in charge, so he cuts them off. He refuses to shake their hands. He puts them on a public list, and he talks about them on his podcast to make sure everyone knows they are not welcome in his world. Number 7. Buff Bagwell. July 2nd, 2001, Tacoma, Washington, Monday Night Raw. This was supposed to be the beginning of something big. WWE had bought WCW in March of that year. They were going to run it as a separate brand, a touring brand with its own roster. Booker T was the WCW World Champion at the time of the purchase. He was the cornerstone of this plan. He accepted the buyout of his Time Warner contract to join WWE immediately. He was betting on himself. His first Raw match was against Buff Bagwell for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. It was a disaster. The crowd hated it. They chanted boring. They rejected the WCW stars before the bell even rang. Vince McMahon killed the WCW brand idea that night, based largely on this one segment. And Booker T blames Buff Bagwell for the failure. Booker has said that match was an audition, succeed or fail, but it was designed to fail. The crowd was hostile. They were loyal to WWE. They had been trained to view WCW as the enemy. The commentary team of Jim Ross and Paul Heyman buried the talent instead of putting them over. The venue was wrong. Tacoma was not a WCW stronghold like Atlanta would have been. Still, Booker showed up ready to work. He did his best. He performed professionally, but Bagwell did not. Bagwell treated it like just another night. He was sloppy. He was unprepared. He did not rise to the occasion, and Booker had to carry him through the entire match. After that match, Bagwell was fired shortly thereafter. He got into an altercation at a training facility. He allegedly faked an injury to get out of working. His mother, Judy Bagwell, called WWE offices to complain about his travel arrangements. This made Bagwell a pariah in the locker room. Booker survived the disaster and went on to a Hall of Fame career. Bagwell faded away into obscurity. Booker T has never let it go. He talks about that match like it was a personal betrayal. He calls Bagwell too WCW. He says Bagwell did not fit culturally into the WWE locker room. He says Bagwell was entitled, a mama's boy who could not handle the pressure, someone who could not handle the big leagues. And maybe Bagwell was all those things. But Booker's bitterness feels excessive. That match failed for a lot of reasons. The booking was terrible. The crowd was set up to reject them. The presentation was wrong. But Booker decided it was all Bagwell's fault. He needed someone to blame for the failure of the WCW invasion. And Bagwell was the easy target. So Booker built a narrative around it. Bagwell was the anchor that almost dragged him down. Bagwell was the reason WCW failed in WWE. And Booker has repeated that narrative for over 20 years. Every time someone asks about the invasion, it is resentment disguised as professionalism. It is bitterness wrapped in business talk. Number 6, Batista. 2006, SummerSlam season. Booker T was King Booker. He was the World Heavyweight Champion on SmackDown. He was the top heel. He was the locker room leader. He had reinvented himself with a fake British accent and regal mannerisms. Batista was the rising megastar. Big, powerful, crossover appeal, the heir apparent to the main event scene. But according to reports from the time, later confirmed by multiple sources, Batista had developed an attitude problem. He was perceived as arrogant. He believed he was bigger than the brand due to his rapid ascent. He had reportedly been vocal about the SmackDown brand being inferior to Raw, and Booker T took that as a personal insult to the wrestlers working hard to build that show. The tension exploded at a commercial shoot. They were filming a promo for the SummerSlam pay-per-view. The cast was assembled at a mansion. A verbal argument started. Something about respect. Something about Batista's lack of respect for the locker room. And then it became physical. A real fight. Fists thrown. A legitimate backstage brawl. Booker T claims he held his own. He says he taught the younger wrestler a lesson in respect. He views it as a necessary correction, a checking of a young ego that was getting out of control. Some reports say Booker sandbagged Batista in matches leading up to or following this fight. Sandbagging means making yourself dead weight to make your opponent look weak. This is a cardinal sin in wrestling, but Booker generally denies unprofessionalism in the ring. Some reports also suggest Booker's wife, Sharmell, was involved in the melee defending her husband, though this is often treated as locker room folklore. Here is the interesting part. Booker and Batista are friends now. Booker says the fight cleared the air. They settled it like men. They had a fight and they did business afterwards. They did not run to the dirt sheets. They did not complain online. They handled it old school. He respects Batista today. But the fact that Booker was willing to get into a fist fight backstage says something important about his character. He does not de-escalate conflicts. He does not walk away from confrontation. He escalates. He meets disrespect with violence. And then he talks about it proudly years later. Like fighting is the correct response to disagreement. Maybe in wrestling culture it is acceptable. But it also shows that Booker T is quick to throw hands when his pride is hurt. And his pride gets hurt easily. Very easily. Number 5. Jeff Jarrett. Booker T's time in TNA wrestling from 2007 to 2009 is often called a paid vacation by wrestling historians. But behind the scenes, there was real tension, specifically with Jeff Jarrett. Jarrett founded TNA in the early 2000s. He also frequently booked himself as the champion, as the top guy, as the main eventer. Booker T came to TNA as a huge star fresh off his King Booker run in WWE. He was a former world champion, a main event talent, but he found the company chaotic, small time compared to WWE. And centered around Jeff Jarrett's ego and his vision. Booker has hinted at backstage arguments over the years. He has said in interviews that Jarrett pushed himself at the expense of incoming talent like Booker and Scott Steiner. He felt that Jarrett's booking decisions were selfish, that Jarrett put himself over instead of building new stars. Booker created the Legends Championship in TNA during his time there. He basically awarded it to himself in storyline. That move reflected his isolation in the company. He felt underutilized. He felt disrespected. He felt that Jarrett's management style was carny, unprofessional, old school in the worst way. Booker viewed TNA as beneath him, as a step backward from WWE, and he viewed Jarrett as the primary reason it stayed that way, as the ceiling that prevented TNA from reaching its potential. This is disdain from a corporate guy toward a mom and pop operation. Booker had worked for WWE, the machine, the big leagues, the professional operation with proper structure. TNA felt like going back to the territories, like going backward in time, and Jarrett represented everything wrong with it. Booker has softened on Jarrett over the years. He acknowledges Jarrett's hustle as a promoter. He admits Jarrett worked hard to keep TNA alive, but the frustration is still there underneath. The feeling that Jarrett held the company back with his ego, that Jarrett's desire to be the star prevented TNA from becoming what it could have been, and that Booker T wasted 2 years of his prime in a company that did not appreciate him or use him correctly. It is the hate of someone who feels they deserve better. And maybe Booker did deserve better, but his bitterness toward Jarrett feels like he cannot accept that he made a bad business decision by going to TNA in the first place. So he blames the guy who ran the place instead of taking responsibility for his own choice. Number 4, the Young Bucks. Matthew and Nicholas Jackson. The Young Bucks represent everything Booker T dislikes about modern wrestling, everything he finds wrong with the current generation. They flip around the ring constantly. They do super kicks in every single match. They break the fourth wall and acknowledge the business. They prioritize athleticism over psychology, over storytelling, over making it look real and believable. Booker T has been very vocal in his criticism of their style. He says they lack selling. They do not react to pain properly. They do too many high spots without building to them. They do not understand the art of working, the art of telling a story in the ring that makes sense. The Young Bucks built their brand on being the antithesis of the WWE style that Booker champions. They embraced the indie style that Booker criticizes, and they became massive stars doing it. They helped found AEW. They became EVPs. They made millions. But Booker dismisses their success. He says they can perform, but they do not work right. He gives them backhanded compliments constantly. He admits they are athletic and talented, but then tears down their philosophy and their approach. It is the classic old school versus new school divide, the traditional versus the modern. And Booker is firmly on the old school side. He cannot accept that wrestling has evolved, that it has changed, that what worked in his era might not be what fans want now. There is also a rumored incident involving a handshake. Early in the Bucks' career, when they were still trying to make it, they allegedly did not shake Booker's hand at a WWE tryout or event. They did not show proper deference to the veteran. Booker perceived it as disrespect, as big leaguing him, as Young young guys who did not know their place. The Young Bucks have addressed this in their book and in interviews. They say it was a misunderstanding. They were intimidated. They did not know the proper protocol. They were nervous. But Booker uses that story repeatedly to illustrate the lack of respect in the modern generation. And it becomes a weapon for him. Proof that these young guys do not get it. Proof that they do not understand the business. Booker has said on his podcast that the Young Bucks can work. He has admitted they are good at what they do, but he cannot help himself. He has to critique them anyway. He has to tear them down. And it comes across as jealousy or stubbornness. An inability to accept that wrestling has evolved past his era, that fans want something different now than they wanted in the 1990s. Booker clings to his era, his style, his rules, his code, and anyone who breaks those rules gets criticized publicly. Even if they are successful, even if they are beloved by their fan base, Booker cannot let it go. He has to be right. He has to prove his ways the correct way, and that makes him look old and bitter and out of touch. Number 3, Corey Graves. In early 2018, Booker T was replaced on the Raw commentary team by Jonathan Coachman. Corey Graves was his colleague on the desk, and Booker went on his radio show and said some shocking things. He said if he saw Corey Graves on the street, he would do something to him. He said nobody knew who Corey Graves was before he retired from in-ring competition due to concussions. He buried him completely. He questioned his credentials. He made it personal. The internet exploded with the comments. Wrestling websites reported it as real beef, as a legitimate backstage conflict brewing. Fans took sides. People debated who was right. But then the truth came out weeks later. It was a planned conflict to generate buzz and attention. Corey Graves and Booker T were on good terms behind the scenes. They had coordinated the whole thing together. It was designed to keep Booker's name in the headlines during a time when he was off television, to create drama, to generate controversy, to get clicks and views, and it worked perfectly. People believed it was real. They wrote articles about it. They made videos analyzing the beef. And Booker got exactly what he wanted: attention and relevance. This reveals something important about Booker T's character. He is willing to manipulate the dirt sheet cycle for his own benefit. He knows how wrestling media works in the modern age. He understands the ecosystem. He knows that conflict sells, that controversy generates interest, so he manufactures it when he needs to. He says inflammatory things deliberately. He lets people believe it is real and legitimate. And then later, sometimes much later, he reveals it was all a work. But by then, the damage is done. The narrative exists in the public consciousness. Corey Graves is on the hate list in people's minds. Even though Booker never actually hated him at all, it is cynical, it is manipulative, it is smart from a business perspective, but it also makes you question everything Booker says going forward. How much of his beef is real? How much is just content for his podcast? How much is manufactured drama designed to keep him relevant? And does Booker even care about the difference anymore? Or is it all just part of the game to him? Number 2, Jason Jordan. During his time as a Raw commentator, Booker T spent months absolutely burying Jason Jordan on air. Jordan was playing Kurt Angle's storyline illegitimate son at the time. It was a controversial angle that fans did not really accept, and Booker relentlessly criticized Jordan every single week. He called out his illegal tactics constantly. He pointed out that Jordan used moves that should have been against the rules. He said Jordan was not over with the crowd. He noted that no one in the audience had signs for him. He made Jordan sound like a total loser who did not deserve his spot week after week after week. It was brutal to listen to. On the surface, this looked like genuine dislike. It seemed like Booker really had a problem with Jason Jordan, but the reality is more complicated than that. Booker was playing a role. He was supposed to be the heel commentator, or the tough love veteran who tells it like it is. He was trying to give Jordan's bland babyface character some edge, some heat, some controversy. By being the antagonist and constantly criticizing him, Booker was trying to force the audience to react, to care about Jordan one way or another. It was actually an attempt to help Jordan get over, but it came across as bullying, as punching down, as a veteran Hall of Famer tearing apart a younger guy who was just trying to make it in the business. And maybe that was the fundamental problem with Booker's approach. His help did not feel like help to anyone watching. It felt mean-spirited. It felt personal, even though it probably was not meant that way. Even if Booker's intentions were good behind the scenes, the execution was harsh and unforgiving. Jordan's career was derailed by a serious neck injury shortly after this period. And looking back now, Booker's constant criticism did not age well at all. It looks like a Hall of Famer kicking a guy when he was down, like someone using their position and credibility to bury someone who had no real chance to respond or defend themselves. And even if Booker's intentions were good, even if he thought he was helping, the execution was harsh enough that it damaged both men. It showed that Booker does not always know how his words land with the audience. He thinks he is teaching, he thinks he is helping, he thinks he is doing the right thing for the business, but sometimes he is just making things worse for everyone involved. Number 1, Triple H. This is the big one, the one that haunts Booker T whether he admits it or not, the one that fans will never let go of. WrestleMania 19, Booker T versus Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship. The build-up to this match was ugly, uncomfortable, hard to watch. Triple H told Booker that people like him do not get to be champion. He referenced Booker's nappy hair in a promo. He brought up his criminal past, his prison time. It was a storyline with heavy racial undertones that made everyone uncomfortable. And the story logic demanded that Booker win. The hero overcomes the villain. The racist gets his comeuppance. Justice prevails. The good guy wins. That is how wrestling stories are supposed to work. But that is not what happened at WrestleMania 19. Triple H won the match clean, decisively. After hitting his finishing move, the pedigree, Triple H waited over 20 seconds before casually pinning Booker. It looked like a complete burial, a humiliation on the biggest stage. Fans were furious immediately. Wrestling critics called it one of the worst booking decisions in WrestleMania history, a terrible ending to a terrible storyline. And Booker T's career never fully recovered from that loss. He should have been world champion. He should have had that coronation moment, that vindication. But Triple H took it from him on the biggest show of the year. Here's the twist that makes this complicated. Booker T says he does not hate Triple H. He says publicly that he moved on. He says it was just business, just a creative decision that he could not control. He says he does not lose sleep over it. He got paid well for the match. He had a long, successful career overall. It was just one night out of thousands. But fans do not believe him when he says this. They cannot accept it. They hold a grudge on his behalf. They hate Triple H for burying Booker. And Booker has to keep defending Triple H publicly. Keep saying it is fine. Keep saying he is okay with it. Keep insisting it does not bother him. But why does Booker have to keep saying it? If he truly moved on completely, why does the topic come up so often? Why does he bring it up in interviews years later? Why does he feel the constant need to reassure everyone that he is okay with what happened? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle of these two extremes. Booker is not consumed by hatred for Triple H. He does not lie awake at night thinking about it, but it bothers him deep down inside. He knows that match should have gone differently. He knows he deserved better than what he got. But Triple H became the chief content officer of WWE, the man in charge of creative. Booker needed to maintain a good relationship with him to keep his commentary job, to keep his pre-show panel spot, to stay relevant in the company. So he buries his real feelings. He plays nice publicly. He says all the right things that the company wants to hear, and he builds another wall, this one between his true feelings and his public persona, between what he really thinks and what he is willing to say on the record. And that is the real story here. Booker T is not a villain. He is not a bad guy, but he is a man who has built a career on pride and professionalism, on respect and hard work. And when that pride gets wounded, he does not forget. He does not forgive easily. He builds walls between himself and the people who hurt him. He refuses handshakes as a statement. He threatens lawsuits to protect his reputation. He goes on his podcast week after week and lists his enemies, one by one. He tells the stories. He sets the record straight. He controls the narrative. Swerve Strickland, Ahmed Johnson, Ryback, Buff Bagwell, Batista, Jeff Jarrett, the Young Bucks, Corey Graves, Jason Jordan, Triple H. 10 names, 10 conflicts, 10 walls built over the years. Some of these conflicts got resolved. Batista became a friend after they fought it out. Corey Graves was never really an enemy at all, but most of these conflicts remain frozen in time, still burning, still unresolved. And behind every name on this list is the same basic pattern. Someone questioned Booker's authority. Someone disrespected his legacy. Someone did not follow his code of conduct. Someone broke the rules that Booker holds sacred, and Booker never let it go. He cannot let it go. It becomes part of his identity. Maybe that is what makes him a legend in the first place. The refusal to compromise on his principles. The unwillingness to accept disrespect from anyone. The pride that pushed him from prison to the Hall of Fame. The work ethic that made him a 5-time WCW champion. The discipline that built a 35-title career. But maybe it is also what makes him lonely. Because when you build that many walls over that many years, eventually you are standing alone on your side. side. And all you have left is a podcast where you talk about the people on the other side, where you explain why they are wrong, where you defend your decisions, where you control your own narrative. Booker T is a Hall of Famer, a two-time inductee, a champion, a survivor who overcame incredible odds, one of the greatest to ever do it, a man who saved himself through wrestling, and that will never change. That legacy is secure. No matter how long the hate list gets, no matter how many more names get added over the years, no matter how many more walls get built, Booker T will always be remembered as one of the best. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that is all that matters in the end. I hated him. That is what fans whispered for years when they watched Triple H stand in the ring. But who did he really hate? Who did he bury? Who did he sabotage behind the curtain? And after all these years, who finally made peace? This is the story of 10 wrestlers who either faced his wrath or felt the cold shoulder of the most powerful man in wrestling. Some got their revenge, some never came back, and some are still waiting for an apology that might never come. Here are 10 wrestlers Triple H either hated or made sure the company did. Number 10, Shane Douglas. Shane Douglas arrived in the WWF during the mid-1990s with a big reputation. He came from ECW, where he was known as the Franchise. He could talk, he could wrestle, he had star power written all over him. Fans who followed him from ECW knew what he was capable of. He had the promo skills to hang with anyone. He had the technical ability to put on classic matches. And he had the confidence of a man who knew he belonged at the top. But when he walked into the locker room, he walked into enemy territory. The Clique ran the place. Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and Triple H. They controlled who got pushed and who got buried. Shane Douglas did not want to play their game. He refused to follow their rules. He did not kiss the ring, and for that, he paid the price. The Clique decided Shane Douglas was lazy. They said he skipped house shows. They said he did not respect the business. They spread rumors about his work ethic. They made sure everyone in power heard their version of the story, but the truth was simpler. Shane did not bow down. He did not treat them like gods. He came in with his own reputation and expected to be treated like the star he was. That attitude did not sit well with the group that controlled everything backstage. So they went to Vince McMahon. They whispered in his ear. They made sure Shane's character became a joke. He was given the gimmick of Dean Douglas, a boring teacher who graded wrestlers on report cards. The vignettes were painful to watch. Shane looked miserable. He sounded robotic. It was creative death wrapped in a suit and tie. Every week, Shane had to stand in front of the camera and grade other wrestlers. He had to deliver lines that made no sense. He had to pretend this gimmick was going to get him over with the fans. But everyone knew it was punishment. The Clique wanted to humiliate him. They wanted to show everyone what happened when you did not fall in line. And the worst part was that Shane had to go along with it. He had signed a contract. He had bills to pay. He had to swallow his pride and do what he was told. The worst moment came when Shawn Michaels had to give up the Intercontinental Championship due to injury. Michaels handed the belt to Shane Douglas in the ring. For a brief moment, it looked like Shane might finally get his shot. The crowd did not know what to think. Was this the start of a real push? Was Shane finally going to be taken seriously? But less than 20 minutes later, he was told to lose the title to Razor Ramon. The whole thing was a setup. Shane was used as a placeholder. He was humiliated on live television. The message was clear. If you do not play ball with the Clique, you do not get to win. You get to be a prop in their game. Shane Douglas left the WWF shortly after. His career never recovered in the way it could have. He went back to ECW. He became a legend there. He won championships. He cut promos that are still talked about today. But he never forgot what Triple H and his friends did to him. Years later, Shane would do shoot interviews where he called out Triple H by name. He said the bullying was real. He said it was designed to protect their spots at the top. And he said Triple H was one of the main architects. Shane Douglas became living proof that crossing the Clique meant the end of your push. Triple H never apologized. He never acknowledged the damage. He just moved on to his next feud. And Shane was left to pick up the pieces of what could have been a legendary WWE career. Number 9, Bret Hart. Bret Hart is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. He was a 5-time WWF champion. He was the excellence of execution. He was beloved by fans around the world. And he was betrayed in the most famous screw job in wrestling history. The Montreal screw job happened on November 9th, 1997. Bret Hart refused to lose the WWF championship in Canada to Shawn Michaels. He had creative control in his contract. He had the right to say no. But Vince McMahon ordered the referee to ring the bell anyway. The match ended. Bret was stripped of his title, and Triple H was right there in the middle of it all. Triple H was not the main villain that night. That title goes to Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels. Vince made the call. Shawn went along with it. But Triple H played a key role behind the scenes. When the plan was being discussed, Triple H was the one who said Bret should be screwed. He argued it was best for business. He believed the company came first, and he had no problem lying to Bret's face in the hours leading up to the match. Bret trusted the people around him. He thought they would respect his contract. He thought they would respect his legacy. That trust was shattered in front of millions of people. The planning of the screw job took place in secret meetings. Only a handful of people knew what was going to happen. Triple H was in those meetings. He gave his input. He helped shape the plan. And when it came time to execute it, he did not hesitate. He stood by and watched as Bret Hart's career in WWE ended in the most humiliating way possible. Triple H knew exactly what he was doing. He knew it would destroy Bret's trust. He knew it would change the business forever. But he did it anyway because it protected the power structure he was part of. The hatred between Bret Hart and Triple H has lasted nearly 30 years. Bret has never forgiven him. In interviews, Bret calls Triple H a phony. He says Triple H only got to the top because he married Stephanie McMahon. He says Triple H was always Vince's hitman, doing the dirty work so others did not have to. Bret even admitted he wishes he had knocked Triple H out in the locker room that night. He said one punch could have stopped everything. He believes one punch could have changed the entire trajectory of WWE history. That is how deep the anger runs. That is how much Bret blames Triple H for what happened. Triple H dismisses Bret's comments. He says it was business. He says Bret held the company hostage by refusing to drop the belt. He says Bret was being selfish. But the facts remain. Triple H actively participated in deceiving a man who gave everything to the business. And when Bret speaks about that night, he does not talk about Shawn or Vince. He talks about Triple H because Triple H was supposed to be neutral. Instead, he chose a side. And that side was not loyalty. It was power. It was protecting the people who could help him climb the ladder. Bret Hart returned to WWE years later for a brief reconciliation. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame. He even had a match with Vince McMahon, but his relationship with Triple H remains ice cold. There are no hugs, no handshakes, just silence. When they see each other at events, they keep their distance. Bret got his Hall of Fame ring, but he never got an apology from the man who helped orchestrate his betrayal, and he probably never will. Number 8, Scott Steiner. Scott Steiner is a freak of nature, literally. His physique was unmatched. His intensity was off the charts. His promos were insane and unpredictable. When he returned to WWE in 2003, fans were excited. This was supposed to be a huge feud. Scott Steiner versus Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship. It should have been a classic. Instead, it became one of the biggest disasters in WrestleMania history, and the blame fell on both men. But the backstage heat was all on Triple H. Scott Steiner did not play politics. He said what he thought. He did what he wanted. And when Triple H tried to control the direction of their feud, Scott pushed back. Steiner was used to being the top guy. He was used to calling his own shots. He was not going to let Triple H dictate how things were going to go. The tension was immediate. Triple H wanted to protect his title. He wanted to make sure he looked strong. Steiner wanted to be the unstoppable monster he had been in WCW. Those two visions did not match. The tension exploded when WWE officials asked Scott to take a steroid test. This was a huge moment. Everyone in the locker room knew what was really going on. Steroid use was an open secret in wrestling, but the company rarely called people out on it unless they wanted to make a point. Scott's response was legendary. He said he would take the test only if Triple H took one with him. The request was immediately dropped. That tells you everything you need to know about who had the real power. Triple H was protected. Steiner was not. And that imbalance defined their entire feud. The match at the Royal Rumble in 2003 was painful to watch. It was slow. It was boring. The crowd turned on both of them. They chanted boring during what was supposed to be the main event. Triple H blamed Scott's conditioning. He said Steiner could not go. He said Steiner was broken down. Scott blamed Triple H's ego. He said Triple H refused to let him do his moves. He said Triple H tried to make him look bad on purpose. The truth was somewhere in the middle, but the damage was done. Scott Steiner's run in WWE was cut short. He was never given another real chance. And years later, Scott would become one of Triple H's loudest critics. Scott Steiner did not stay quiet. He did shoot interviews where he tore into Triple H. He questioned Triple H's qualifications to run the company. He mocked his physique. He called him out for playing politics. He said Triple H was never as good as people claimed. And he said the only reason Triple H made it to the top was because he married the boss's daughter. Steiner refused to play nice. He refused to stay stay silent, and because of that, he has never been welcomed back. Triple H moved on like nothing happened. He kept his title, he kept his spot, and Scott Steiner was pushed down the card until he eventually left. There was no reconciliation, no handshake, no Hall of Fame induction. Scott Steiner remains one of the few major names from that era who has never been welcomed back. And the reason is simple. He challenged Triple H. He refused to bow down, and Triple H does not forget. Number 7, Rob Van Dam. Rob Van Dam was the coolest wrestler in the company. His moveset was unique, his charisma was effortless, and in 2002, he was more over than almost anyone on the roster. Fans chanted his name in every arena. They wanted him to be champion. They believed in him. But Triple H had other plans. During Triple H's reign of terror, Rob Van Dam was repeatedly buried in feuds that made no sense. And behind the scenes, Triple H made it clear he did not respect Rob's style or his lifestyle. Triple H mocked Rob Van Dam for smoking marijuana. He teased him in front of the locker room. He made jokes about Rob's laid-back attitude. He said Rob did not take the business seriously enough. He said Rob was not professional. And when Rob injured Triple H during the first ever Elimination Chamber match, things got worse. Rob botched a 5-star frog splash. Triple H's larynx was crushed. It was a serious injury. Rob apologized immediately. He felt terrible. But the company's response was to limit his push even further. Rob Van Dam was never allowed to reach the main event the way fans wanted. The injury was not entirely Rob's fault. Wrestling is dangerous. Mistakes happen. But Triple H used it as ammunition. He made sure everyone knew Rob was the one who hurt him. He made sure the story spread through the locker room. And when it came time to book future matches, Rob was always positioned a step below where he should have been. He was kept in the mid-card. He was given meaningless feuds. And whenever he got close to the top, something always stopped him. Rob later talked about interactions where Triple H would tell him the company was going to pull the plug on his momentum. He would say it with a smile, like it was a joke. But Rob knew it was not a joke. It was a warning. Triple H saw Rob as a mid-carder, and no amount of crowd support would change that. Rob Van Dam remained stuck in the mid-card for years, not because he lacked talent, but because the man at the top did not want him to rise. Triple H did not see Rob as a threat to his position. He saw Rob as someone who did not fit the mold of what a champion should be. The relationship between Rob Van Dam and Triple H eventually softened. Rob returned to WWE multiple times over the years, but he was never given the main event run he deserved. And when Rob speaks about that era, he does not hide his frustration. He knows what could have been, and he knows who stopped it from happening. Triple H buried Rob Van Dam with a smile, and Rob never forgot. Number 6, Booker T. Booker T was a 5-time WCW champion. He was one of the most talented performers in the business. He could wrestle, he could talk, he could entertain. And in 2003, he was on the verge of becoming WWE champion. The build to WrestleMania 99 was intense. Triple H cut promos that made fans uncomfortable. He told Booker T that people like you do not become champion. He told Booker to do a spine-a-rooney for his amusement. The subtext was clear. This was not just about wrestling. This was about race. Triple H's promos during that feud crossed a line. He talked down to Booker T. He treated him like he was less than. He made it clear that in his mind, Booker T was an entertainer, not a competitor. And the way he said it made fans believe there was a deeper meaning. Was he saying that black wrestlers could not be champions? Was he saying that WCW stars did not deserve to be at the top? Either way, the message was ugly, and fans wanted Booker T to prove Triple H wrong. Fans rallied behind Booker T. They wanted him to win. They needed him to win. The story demanded it. The entire feud was built around Booker T overcoming the doubt, overcoming the disrespect, overcoming the man who said he did not belong. But when the match ended, Triple H pinned Booker T after a single pedigree, and the pin took almost 30 seconds. Triple H crawled across the ring in slow motion. He draped one arm over Booker's chest. The referee counted 1, 2, 3. The crowd sat in stunned silence. Booker T lost, and his momentum died that night. The decision to have Triple H win was criticized immediately. Fans could not understand it. Wrestlers could not understand it. Even people backstage thought it was the wrong call. Booker T should have won. The story made no sense otherwise. But Triple H went over, and the reason seemed clear to everyone watching. Triple H wanted to protect his spot. He did not want to lose to a WCW guy. He did not want to give up his title. So he used his influence to make sure he won. Booker T has said in interviews that the paycheck made up for the loss. He said he got paid well for that match. And at the end of the day, wrestling is a business. But fans never never forgave it. They saw it as Triple H using his power to keep a WCW star from reaching the top. They saw it as a missed opportunity to tell a redemptive story, and they saw it as proof that Triple H cared more about his spot than the good of the company. Booker T eventually won the World Heavyweight Championship years later, but it was too late. The moment had passed. The magic was gone. Triple H never addressed the controversy. He moved on to his next feud. Booker T stayed professional, but the damage was done. That WrestleMania match remains one of the most criticized booking decisions in WWE history, and it all came down to one man refusing to do the right thing. Triple H could have made Booker T a star that night. Instead, he chose to beat him, and the industry remembers. Number 5, Goldberg. Goldberg was the biggest star WCW ever created. His undefeated streak made him a household name. He was unstoppable. He was explosive. And when he signed with WWE in 2003, fans were excited. This was the dream match, Goldberg versus Triple H. But before Goldberg even arrived, Triple H was mocking him. He made fun of Goldberg for punching through a limousine window in WCW. The injury from that incident kept Goldberg out for months during WCW's final days. Triple H called Goldberg reckless. He said Goldberg did not love the business, and when Goldberg finally showed up, the backstage environment was hostile. Goldberg felt uncomfortable from day one. Triple H was close friends with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. Both men had issues with Goldberg from their WCW days. Nash famously ended Goldberg's streak. Hall and Nash were part of the NWO, which feuded with Goldberg for years, and Triple H made sure Goldberg knew he was not welcome in their circle. The locker room politics were brutal. Goldberg was an outsider. He did not have allies, and he did not have the political skills to navigate the WWE system. The creative direction for Goldberg was terrible. He was forced into long, competitive matches that did not play to his strengths. Goldberg worked best as a dominant force. Spear, jackhammer, win. That was his formula. It worked in WCW, but WWE wanted to do things differently. They wanted Goldberg to have 20-minute matches. They wanted him to sell for his opponents. They wanted to prove that their guys were just as good as the WCW legend. And in the process, they killed what made Goldberg special. The worst moment came at SummerSlam 2003. Triple H pinned Goldberg clean in the middle of the ring, and Triple H was so injured during that match, he could barely walk. His groin was torn. He could hardly move, but he still went over. It was a political statement. Triple H wanted everyone to know that even a legend like Goldberg could not beat him. Goldberg was furious backstage. He threw equipment. He yelled. He could not believe what had just happened. But when Triple H confronted him, Goldberg backed down. He thanked Triple H for the match and left. The next day, Goldberg was suspended. Goldberg's WWE run ended shortly after. He left the company and did not return for over a decade. And when he finally came back for brief appearances, his relationship with Triple H remained cold. In recent interviews, Goldberg has suggested that the lingering animosity is why he has not been asked back for a final match in 2024 or 2025. Triple H is now in charge, and Goldberg is still on the outside. Some grudges never die. And even though both men are older now, the tension from 2003 still hangs over their relationship. Number 4, Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior was a wrestling icon. His energy was unmatched. His promos were legendary. And when he returned to WWE in 1996, fans went wild. But his match with Triple H at WrestleMania 13 was a disaster. Triple H was a rising star at the time. He pitched creative ideas for the match. He wanted to do something memorable. He wanted to show what he could do. The Warrior ignored all of them. He treated Triple H like a jobber, and the match lasted 1 minute and 39 seconds. The Warrior no-sold Triple H's finisher. He hit his own moves. He pinned Triple H clean, and he left. Triple H was humiliated. He later called the experience one of the most unprofessional moments of his career. He said the Warrior refused to listen. He said the Warrior only cared about himself. And for years, Triple H harbored deep resentment. He did not hide it. He talked about it in interviews. He made it clear the Warrior was a selfish performer who did not respect the business. Triple H felt disrespected. He felt like his ideas were dismissed, and he felt like the Warrior did not care about helping the next generation. But then something changed. In 2014, Triple H was in his executive role. He had the power to bring people back, and he chose to bring back the Ultimate Warrior. Triple H spearheaded the Warrior's induction into the Hall of Fame. The Warrior gave an emotional speech. He thanked WWE. He thanked the fans. And just days later, the Ultimate Warrior passed away. Triple H was one of the last people to reconcile with him. This moment showed a different side of Triple H. It showed he could let go of old grudges. It showed he could prioritize legacy over personal feelings. But but it also raised questions. Why did it take so long? Why did Triple H wait until he had all the power before making peace? The Warrior deserved that Hall of Fame induction years earlier, but Triple H held the grudge until the very end, and only when he became the boss did he finally let it go. The timing felt convenient. It felt like Triple H wanted to control the narrative. And while the Warrior's induction was emotional, it was also a reminder that Triple H holds the keys to everyone's legacy now. Number 3, Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho was a star before he ever walked into WWE. He made his name in WCW. He had the mic skills, he had the in-ring ability, and when he debuted in 1999, the crowd erupted. But backstage, Triple H was not impressed. He mocked Jericho, he made fun of his size, he dismissed his workhorse style, and he made sure Jericho's transition into the main event was as difficult as possible. Jericho has talked about this in his books and podcasts. He said Triple H saw him as a threat. Jericho had charisma. He could cut promos that rivaled anyone in the company, and that made Triple H uncomfortable. So Triple H used his political power to slow Jericho's rise. He made sure Jericho stayed in the mid-card longer than necessary. He made sure Jericho was never seen as a real threat to the top guys. Jericho was given opportunities, but they were always limited. He would get close to the main event, then he would be pulled back down. The tension was real. It was not just storyline heat. Jericho and Triple H genuinely did not like each other, and it showed in their matches. The chemistry was off. The promos felt forced. But over time, things cooled down. Both men eventually became elder statesmen in the company. They found common ground, but Jericho never forgot those early years. He never forgot how hard Triple H made it for him. He never forgot the mocking comments, the dismissive attitude, the feeling that he had to prove himself over and over again just to be taken seriously. Chris Jericho eventually became a multi-time world champion. He became one of the greatest performers of all time, and he did it despite Triple H's resistance. Jericho proved that talent wins in the end, but it should not have been that hard. Triple H could have made Jericho's rise easier. Instead, he made it a fight, and Jericho had to claw his way to the top. The fact that Jericho succeeded says more about his determination than anything else, but it also says something about Triple H's insecurity during that era. Number 2, CM Punk. CM Punk was the voice of the voiceless. His pipe bomb promo in 2011 changed the industry. He called out WWE. He called out Triple H by name. He said Triple H was a corporate sellout. He said Triple H only cared about burying people, and the crowd ate it up. For the first time in years, someone was speaking the truth, and Triple H was in the crosshairs. The feud between CM Punk and Triple H was personal from the start. Punk believed Triple H was everything wrong with wrestling. He believed Triple H represented the old guard that refused to let new talent shine. He believed Triple H was a gatekeeper who only cared about protecting his own legacy. Triple H believed Punk was disrespectful and ungrateful. He believed Punk did not appreciate the opportunities he had been given. He believed Punk was biting the hand that fed him. They had a match at Night of Champions in 2011. Triple H won, and that decision killed Punk's momentum during the summer of Punk. Fans were furious. They wanted Punk to win, but Triple H went over, because that is what Triple H does. The hatred between them grew over the years. Punk walked out of WWE in 2014. He gave a podcast interview where he buried Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. He said they made his life miserable. He said they never respected him. He said they treated him like he was not worth their time. And for nearly a decade, CM Punk stayed away. He refused to return as long as Triple H was in power. But then something shifted. In 2023, CM Punk came back, and somehow he and Triple H found a way to work together. The reconciliation shocked everyone. Fans could not believe it. But Triple H's new philosophy was clear. Bring back the stars, make money, put the past aside, and CM Punk agreed. They shook hands, they moved forward. But the question remains, did they really forgive each other, or did they just realize the business was bigger than their egos? Either way, CM Punk is back, and Triple H is the one who brought him home. It is a business decision, but it also shows that even the deepest grudges can be set aside when the money's right. Number 1, Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock was a legend before he ever entered a wrestling ring. He was a pioneer in mixed martial arts. He was the world's most dangerous man. And when he joined WWE in the late 1990s, he brought legitimacy. But he also brought a moral code that did not fit the locker room culture. The Clique loved to haze younger wrestlers. They played pranks, they bullied, they controlled, and Ken Shamrock stood up to them. Shamrock refused to tolerate the hazing. He called it unprofessional. He called it mean-spirited. He said it had no place in a professional environment. And And when he confronted Triple H and the others, he made enemies for life. Shamrock believes that moment is why he has never been welcomed back to WWE. He believes Triple H holds a grudge, and the fact that Shamrock has never been inducted into the Hall of Fame supports that theory. He was a huge star during the Attitude Era. He deserves recognition, but he has been ignored. Triple H's role as a locker room enforcer was well documented. He maintained the traditional hazing culture. He believed it was part of the business. He believed it toughened people up. He believed it separated the weak from the strong. And anyone who challenged that system was seen as soft or disrespectful. Ken Shamrock challenged it, and he paid the price. His WWE career ended earlier than it should have, and he has never been brought back in any meaningful way. Ken Shamrock remains one of the only major Attitude Era stars who has not reconciled with WWE. He has not been on a Legends panel, he has not been given a Hall of Fame speech, and he has not been invited to any major anniversary shows. The reason is simple. He stood up to Triple H, and Triple H never forgot. Shamrock could have been a Hall of Famer years ago, but the man who runs the company remembers the guy who said no. And as long as Triple H is in charge, Shamrock will continue to be left out in the cold. Even in 2025, the scars from these rivalries remain. Triple H is now the chief content officer of WWE. He has the power to bring people back. He has the power to forgive. And to his credit, he has done it in some cases. CM Punk is back. The Ultimate Warrior got his Hall of Fame moment. Cody Rhodes returned and won the title. But not everyone has been brought home. Scott Steiner is still out. Ken Shamrock is still waiting. And Bret Hart still refuses to fully forgive. Triple H has flipped the script. He went from burying talent to bringing them back. He went from protecting his spot to building new stars. He went from being the gatekeeper to being the man who opens the door. But the damage he caused on the way up will never be fully erased. The wrestlers he buried remember. The careers he stalled do not get a second chance. And the fans who watched it happen will never forget. You cannot undo 20 years of politics with a few handshakes and Hall of Fame speeches. Triple H became the boss by outlasting everyone. He married into the McMahon family. He played the political game better than anyone, and he survived long enough to take control. But survival is not the same as redemption. You can bring people back, you can make peace, but you cannot undo the past. And the past is filled with wrestlers who never got their moment because Triple H stood in the way. Shane Douglas never got his main event run. Booker T never got his WrestleMania moment. Rob Van Dam never got his championship reign. And those losses are permanent. If you think Triple H was right to protect his spot, hit like. If you think he went too far, hit subscribe. Either way, we have got more heat coming. See you in the next one. He was the weakest. That's what Bobby the Brain Heenan truly believed about one of wrestling's biggest stars. But that's just the beginning of the story. Heenan was one of the greatest minds professional wrestling ever produced. His quick wit and perfect timing made him a legend. First as a manager, then as a commentator. His on-screen battles with broadcast partner Gorilla Monsoon were television gold. Yet behind the scenes, the two were the best of friends. Heenan was a master at making you believe the hate was real, even when it was just brilliant acting. But what happens when the on-screen hater becomes a real-life one? Whilst Heenan was a master of fake conflict, behind the scenes, a bitter, resentful man was taking notes. This is the story of how wrestling's greatest brain may have just been its most prolific grudge holder, unable to cope with a world that was leaving him behind. Let's start with the catastrophe that was World Championship Wrestling. Heenan left the WWF because he was exhausted from constant travel and wanted to be closer to his daughter, who was studying at the University of Alabama. When Eric Bischoff came calling, it seemed like the perfect move. Lighter schedule, less travel, more family time. What could go wrong? Everything, apparently. Heenan would later call his 7 years in WCW the worst time of his entire life. And who did he blame? The man who signed his paycheck, Eric Bischoff. Here's the thing, though. Heenan took a high-paying job with reduced hours in a company everyone knew was chaotic. When it turned out to be exactly that, chaotic, he couldn't accept it. Bischoff promised him a better quality of life, and when WCW's disorganized management failed to deliver, Heenan spent years pointing fingers at the man who gave him the job in the first place. Heenan clearly felt loyalty was a one-way street. What do you think? Is a corporate directive a good enough reason to ghost a friend, or was Heenan right to be furious? Let us know your take in the comments below. And whilst you're there, make sure you subscribe for more stories the wrestling world tried to forget. The situation got worse when WCW tried to make Heenan sign a contract saying he couldn't criticize the company. When he sent it to his lawyer, WCW claimed they'd consider it signed even if he didn't return it. It was unprofessional, certainly, but it was also the reality of working for a company that was falling apart. Yet Heenan stayed, cashed the checks, and then complained about every moment. But Bischoff wasn't the only WCW colleague who made the list. Tony Schiavone, Heenan's fellow commentator, became the target of perhaps the most unreasonable grudge in wrestling history. The two men had tension from the start. Schiavone came from the old-school, realistic National Wrestling Alliance style, whilst Heenan brought his loud, cartoonish WWF persona. Viewers could see the friction building, and by early 1998, it was obvious they couldn't stand each other. The breaking point came in November 2000 when Heenan was fired. He was absolutely furious that Schiavone, allegedly the person in charge of the announcing team, didn't ring him afterwards. Not a call, not a message, nothing. Heenan saw this as the ultimate betrayal. But here's what Heenan either didn't know or chose to ignore. Turner Broadcasting's Human Resources Department contacted Schiavone directly and told him not to reach out to Heenan because of potential legal issues. Schiavone followed orders from his employer, like any sensible person would. Think about that for a moment. What kind of person expects a colleague to risk their job over a phone call? Schiavone had bills to pay and a family to support. He couldn't jeopardize his position just to check in on someone who'd been let go. It was a corporate directive, not a personal slight. Yet Heenan nursed this grudge for years, treating a simple act of professional self-preservation as a deep, personal betrayal. They eventually made peace years later whilst doing voiceover work for a video game. But the damage had been done. Heenan's betrayal was nothing more than a petty and unreasonable expectation that loyalty meant more than job security. Then there's Mark Madden. As WCW tried to evolve, management started bringing in new voices. Madden and Scott Hudson were pushed to the forefront, whilst Heenan was moved aside. Eventually, he was demoted to WCW Worldwide, a secondary program, before being fired altogether. Heenan hated Madden for it. But let's be honest. This wasn't about Madden personally. This was about an aging legend who couldn't handle being replaced. Heenan felt he was being treated like an old-timer that didn't fit the product, and he was right. But instead of accepting that his time had passed, he directed all his anger at Madden. It wasn't principle. It was sour grapes. Madden was just the younger voice management preferred, and Heenan couldn't cope with no longer being in the spotlight. His hatred for Madden was simply proxy resentment for a regime that had decided he was no longer relevant. The fourth WCW name on Heenan's blacklist might surprise you. Kimberly Page, the wife of Diamond Dallas Page. Kimberly wasn't a wrestler, an executive, or even a full-time performer. She was a Nitro girl and a fixture in her husband's storylines. Yet Heenan specifically noted he didn't get with Kimberly Page. Why? Because she represented everything Heenan hated about the new WCW. She was a high-profile personality who held backstage influence purely because of who she was married to. For a traditionalist like Heenan, who believed in earning your place through years in the business, Kimberly symbolized the encroachment of celebrity culture into wrestling's power structure. She wasn't a wrestler, but she had a say. She wasn't part of the old guard, but she had influence. Heenan's dislike for Kimberly wasn't really about her. It was about his inability to accept that wrestling had changed, that connections and celebrity appeal now mattered as much as, if not more than, years of hard work. He came from an older era and simply couldn't adapt. But Heenan's grudges didn't start in WCW. Two names on his list go back much further, and they reveal just as much about his character. The Ultimate Warrior was everything Heenan despised about the new generation of wrestlers. Warrior was intense, powerful, and wildly popular, but Heenan thought he was reckless and dangerous. Heenan's biggest complaint was that Warrior didn't respect the veterans. He would clothesline Andre the Giant with excessive force during matches, despite Andre's severe physical limitations. Andre, not one to be disrespected, would respond by punching Warrior back just as hard. Heenan framed his hatred as concern for safety and professionalism. And maybe it was, to some extent, but it's also possible this was just an old-school manager who couldn't understand a new, explosive style of wrestling. Heenan thought Warrior was fundamentally weak, lacking in technique and respect. Yet his opinion didn't stop Warrior from becoming one of the biggest stars of the era. Perhaps Heenan's concern was less about safety and more about contempt for a style he simply didn't understand or appreciate. And then there's the big one. Hulk Hogan. This is where the hypocrisy truly shines through. For 20 years, Heenan professed his hatred for Hogan. It was the backbone of his entire persona, the central conflict that defined his career. From the AWA to the WWF to WCW, Heenan was anti-Hogan, no matter what. The most famous example came at Bash at the Beach 1996, when Hogan revealed himself as the third man in the New World Order. Heenan's commentary was legendary. "Yeah, but whose side is he on?" he screamed. And when Hogan turned heel, Heenan validated his decades of suspicion. "What have I been saying all these years?" It was brilliant. It was perfect. It was also obsessive. Here's the truth Heenan admitted himself. Hogan helped his career. Hogan got him into the AWA and later the WWF. Hogan was easy to travel with. And most importantly, Hogan was the single biggest source of income for him. If Heenan could have managed anyone, he said, it would have been Hogan, because that's where the money would have been. So why the hatred? Because Hogan represented everything Heenan resented. Hogan was the muscle-bound, cartoonish, corporate star who monopolized the main event for decades. He was the overwhelming power Heenan, the cerebral heel, was forever trying to undermine. After 20 years of playing the role, the line between performance and reality disappeared. Heenan's legendary anti-Hogan commentary wasn't just brilliant character work. It was the obsessive ranting of a man consumed by professional jealousy. His ideological opposition to Hogan's style was just a convenient excuse to mask his bitterness about Hogan's dominance. Heenan hated Hogan not because of who he was, but because of what he represented, a level of success and power Heenan could never achieve himself. But here's the truth we can't ignore. Regardless of his personal bitterness, Bobby Heenan's talent was immense. His quick wit and perfect timing made him a once-in-a-generation performer. No one could work a microphone like the Brain. No one could blur the line between character and reality quite like he did. Perhaps he blurred it so much that he too got lost in the act. His list of hates reveals a complex man, a brilliant performer, a loyal friend to some, and a bitter rival to others. He was a legend whose genius was matched only by his grievances, leaving behind a legacy that is as complicated as it is iconic. Bobby Heenan was wrestling's greatest hater, and maybe, just maybe, that was the role he was always meant to play, both on screen and off.